There we go. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mitch Frazier. I'm CEO of Agrinovus, and just delighted you have chosen to invest your time with us this morning. This morning's conversation is one that is near and dear to our heart. At Agrinovus, we're a nonprofit focused entirely on growing what we call the ag bioscience economy. It's food, it's animal health, it's plant science, it's ag tech, and it's agriculture. Those 5 key areas are what we call the ag biosciences. And at the end of the day, all of those are connected to one thing. It's food. And the reality is this, is food is the only economy in the world that touches every person on the planet. Think about that for just a moment. This is the only economy that touches every person on the planet. Today, we've assembled an amazing group of leaders to help walk through what this actually means. You have a leader from the largest pure play ag company in the world. You have an amazing leader in corporate venture capital. You have a venture-backed startup who is transforming the food industry, and they're all going to do it right here as we look at this connection between food, ag, and ag bioscience. So without further ado, Christy Wright.
Thank you, Mitch. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy you've decided to join us today. We will be talking about feeding consumer demand and health driving the future of food for the next 45 minutes. So really pleased to have you all here. This is a fascinating topic, a really important time for us to be discussing this, and what better place, honestly, than here with a group and a room full of innovators in both thought and deed. I really look forward to, I think, an inspirational and also hopefully a very practical conversation about this topic. So the way that we're going to be spending our time together is we'll start with some moderated Q&A, and then we've notched out a little bit of time for questions from the audience. So as you have some thoughts, make sure that you jot them down. And then I'll pull the microphone back up here for one final challenging question that I would like to pose to our panelists, and we will leave it at that. So without further ado, we are joined today by a panel of accomplished leaders from across the agri-food value chain with expertise in various areas relevant to our conversation. And so let's start with some introductions. And so I'm going to ask the panelists, could you all introduce yourself in a few sentences, your name, your role, and your connection to this topic, and then tell us one thing that nobody knows about you. Lorelei, let's start with you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Lorelei Bergen. I am the VP of Retail Insights for a company called Nielsen IQ. You might know the company formerly known as Nielsen that used to do the ratings. We are a spinoff of that, and anything with a UPC code we track. We track 97% of consumer behavior in the world. So, yes, I know everything that you guys are doing and buying online and in store. And I'm really excited to be a part of this. I actually formerly used to be in healthcare, so I believe that there's such a convergence between healthcare and retail. And so I'll share some of that insight with you guys today, where that kind of puck is headed. But something that nobody knows about me, I'm embarrassingly will tell you my first job. I grew up in Central Illinois, and I detasseled corn. So I think I clean up well now. It was my favorite job, and I used to say I loved it when it rained because we would just slide through all the mud, and my parents would just be so upset when we got home. But yeah, so that was my first job, and I love ag for that reason.
Awesome. Thanks, Lorelei. I'm Juliana Green. I'm a principal with FMC Ventures. Some of you might be aware of FMC, but we're a large agrochemical sciences company. The Ventures team is really the strategic arm of FMC, so we're the CVC, so we make strategic investments for the organization to help kind of shape the future of crop protection. We look at game-changing technologies in the area of biocontrol, precision ag solutions, agriculture, fintech, to really help shape the future of agriculture. We come in pretty early, so I would say seed to Series A. And then we do really like to see how we can form those commercial partnerships with those companies. And yeah, nice to meet all of you guys. And my fun fact is I was a former speed skater. Pass it off to you, Daniel.
My name is Daniel Rusek. I am the founder and CEO of Atarraya, and we have developed an end-to-end technology to enable the production of shrimp in cities. And our shrimp farm is 10 minutes away from here. So if you want to visit, let me know. And this is relevant because 95% of shrimp in the United States is imported. So now we are enabling the local production of it. Fun fact that nobody knows about me: when I was 9 years old, my mom asked me, "Son, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I told her, I want to be a shrimp farmer in Indianapolis. So.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, thanks everybody for joining today, and let's get started. So, Lorelei, we couldn't ask for a more informed expert on consumer buying behavior than you and Nielsen IQ. So let's start there with the state of the consumer. Can you tell us where is the consumer right now related to purchase drivers and consumption patterns related to food, and where is that headed in the next few years?
Absolutely. So the consumer, as you guys know, has been very volatile. We had faced a lot of inflationary pressures. Those are starting to lighten up. The pressures are decreased by 1.7%, so that we will see now impact shopping behavior. So our consumers at this point, they historically were very conscientious about what they're buying. Now they're just very intentional. So although they have more money in their pockets, they're going to be spending it on less volume. So we in our business look at everything by sales and unit volume, because just a company can say, hey, our sales are up 20%, but volume is what matters. And so we are going to see that consumers are still going to remain pretty flat in volume. So that's important to note. And then as far as like how they're shopping the store, they are spending more money on the peripheral, okay, so the outer layer of the store, than the internal area. So what can help with that increase in that sale is really going to be the promotional activity from retailers. Retail media, so how many of you guys are receiving personalized offers more than ever from your retailer? Okay, that's intentional, guys. Okay, $37 million from retailers was spent just last year in those programs, and it's only going to increase. And then as far as like how many of you also are now shifting to private label, our own brand? Do you guys know what that is, own brand? They're so good at masking it now. I tell you, Target has like 17 own brands and you never know it. That power is instrumental to the retailers. Last year alone, we had a $6 billion, guys, incremental increase in private label alone. So that's not going to go anywhere. But I think that the consumers are also getting more savvy. We're going to have 131 million new consumers entering the market in 2025. So those Gen Z, their power in the market is going to be huge. Another thing that we're seeing in a shift is how people buy their food. So social media is not going anywhere. TikTok is maybe not going anywhere. What we have found is that the purchasing power, 1 in 3 people now are going to be making purchases based off social media influence. And I always bring this really quick thing back to the surface. I am an avid TikToker. I have to be for my job. And one thing I noticed is when people were putting out there on TikTok how to properly wash their vegetables, we saw an increase in sale in baking soda and vinegar, okay? Huge increases just because the influence of those videos. So just food for thought is if you're in the ag business, this is an area and a platform you need to invest in and not shy away from. You're going to see more QR codes on your produce as well of how to properly handle produce so we have less waste, because those younger consumers care more about waste and sustainability than some of our older folks. So that's something that I would just kind of highlight what's going on in the consumer space.
Great. Wow, that's interesting. I feel like we need to be better friends, Lorelei. I mean, not only are you interesting and fun, but you have very interesting information about how all of us are acting and behaving in the consumer space. So with that as a backdrop, let's go to you, Juliana, and talk a little bit about FMC, your role at the start, really, of the agri-food value chain. You're all the way upstream. So how do you influence from that position? And as you have seen the food marketplace change, how has your approach maybe shifted as a result?
Definitely. So, as Christy just mentioned, we're much more upstream. So we're really looking at, I would say, major inputs into kind of the farming supply chain. But with that in mind, we kind of have to think about that end consumer and kind of the CPG trends that are going to shape our future. And so I'd say there's 3 kind of main things that we're seeing. I would say first, different types of sustainable inputs, because if we look at the crop protection industry, crop protection is not going to go away. It's a means to kind of preserve our food systems throughout the world. But we're looking to say, okay, how do we make this even better? And so I'd say one, unique kind of biocontrol technologies that are more sustainable, biodegradable, friendly to pollinators, obviously non-toxic. Second category is thinking through unique precision agriculture solutions. So how do we really control, what's being applied on the field? How much do you really need? Because this has an influence on kind of farmer ROI. So how do we improve the means to kind of increase production, but then it also has this impact on end kind of CPG consumers where you have kind of more increase in organic labeling, thinking through kind of more sustainable foods. And then I would say the third category is really around genetics. So there's kind of new technologies that are coming out. One's called, I'm certain you guys are probably familiar, but you have your traditional kind of GMO versus gene editing. So GMO, you're introducing kind of a new segment of DNA into that seed. Gene editing, you're actually just editing what's already in kind of a seed's DNA. And so there's a lot of different technologies going into that because you can really transform what types of crops you're creating. So higher protein or different types of bioactives or different types of things that the end consumer is going to want, because this really shapes new ingredients and kind of new types of channels or segments to meet and keep up with consumer demand. So that's kind of what we're seeing more upstream.
Great, thanks. And hopefully you all will kind of keep that in mind as well as we get further into this conversation and start to talk about health driving the agri-food chain as well and what that means, because I think some of the things that you just mentioned may come back into play in that part of the conversation. So Daniel, let's go to you, founder and CEO of Ataraya. You've made an investment in the downstream value chain of aquaculture in getting closer to the consumer. Tell us about that choice, the problem you're solving, and also what are the strongest pulls you're seeing from your customers right now in terms of what they want?
Yeah, great question. So we are basically changing a category, right? Because 95% of shrimp is imported. That means it's frozen because it needs to travel thousands of miles in order to get here. And if it is frozen and it's a commodity, so people like to hold it frozen, it can be 5 years frozen. And in order for your shrimp to look beautiful when you open the bag, it needs to have huge amount of preservatives, right? So, and that changes the taste and also changes the expectation of chefs and the consumer. So we are offering fresh shrimp that is untainted by preservatives. We didn't use any kinds of antibiotics. It's produced local, and it has a complete different texture, and it has a completely kind of health profile. But if we sell it to a distributor, they don't care, really. I mean, the distributors are responding to what their customers are asking for. So then we need to get closer to the consumer. But getting to everybody would be very expensive. So one great thing about seafood is that 75% of seafood in America is consumed at the food service channel. The reason for this might be that people are afraid of not cooking it very well, right? Or cooking it too much or something like that. So then, if you think about now in this influencer economy, then you get into this diffusion of innovation. The structure of the system is very well defined in terms of people are looking at chefs about what's good, what's high quality, what's sustainable. So this is why we are working with them. And then we can also use those relationships to then develop relationships with distributors. Like for instance, in New York, Atomix, which is the #1 restaurant in the United States, is our customer. So then we can go to a distributor and say, Atomix is buying our shrimp, right? So this is because we're a very small company, right? And we need to punch above our weight if we want to do anything, right? So this is how we are doing it.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So let's come back to you, Lorelei, to take the next step in this dialogue. So economics are hard to negate when it comes to consumer behavior. You know, quality food at an affordable price is a constant. Human beings tend to trade away and back to basics when financial times are tight. But American consumers are also facing some health concerns that are starting to shape their buying behavior. So can you tell us what that looks like, what you're seeing in terms of health and wellness as a purchase driver now and what we should expect in the future?
Yeah, so when we think of health and wellness, how we track it is by claims. So if you have any product, NIQ has 1,300 attributes for every single product out there in the market. We have licensed dietitians on staff, and they have the ability to denote if something is qualified or if it's stated on pack. So you will also see more manufacturers on the front of their package making very distinct claims like free from more than ever, because the purchasing and buying behavior behind an actual consumer seeing that, because they're very conscientious of that, is on the rise. So I will say that when we had high inflationary times, the better for you items took a little bit of a dip, okay, from total store. So the items that are not better for you. However, we are going back to where we were, I would say maybe end of 2021, where the better for you items are back and on a rise. So that's also another indicator for us, is when the economy is getting a little bit back on track, is how people are shopping and how they're trading down or up.
And so Daniel and Juliana, as we think about this convergence of food and agriculture and health, what's the business opportunity here? Daniel, it seems like you're already responding to it and are innovating toward it in how you operate and in your supply chain and your approach. But I'm curious, as you two, as you're experiencing it as a business owner, and Juliana, is from your position in the value chain and your role with FMC Ventures, what do you see as the business opportunity in this converging space?
Daniel, okay. So I would say, from our perspective, I would say we're actually seeing different types of, I would say, either channels or new kind of product development, but also different types of business models. So, if we look at the ingredient space, we're seeing a lot of companies saying, okay, well, let's create our own kind of seeds more upstream, but let's also figure out how do we control kind of the manufacturing of that end ingredient as well. So different types of manufacturing technologies, fermentation. If we look a little bit more upstream, we're seeing things like molecular farming, where, as an example, you're seeing kind of a animal protein being embedded into maybe a soybean. So there's several companies coming out with new technologies there, kind of more in the genetics, gene editing space, to create higher protein ingredients to kind of meet these kind of end demand for kind of consumer trends. And you're seeing also just more vertical integration of companies trying to control different parts of the supply chain to make sure that you're giving the consumer, what they want to see. More kind of bioactive ingredients, or more, I would say, data analytic type businesses that are trying to say, okay, how do we look at these end ingredients? What are these kind of end consumer health outcomes? And then how do we figure out how to identify those right types of ingredients or make those ingredients more concentrated, either through upstream ag trends, manufacturing, or figuring out how to create some sort of chemical reaction when you're creating that end food. So that's kind of some of the trends that we're seeing.
So to the point of Mitch that introduced the panel, that food affects everyone, right? But I think that the modern consumer, it's a weird time, because the more we know about our food, the less we enjoy it, right? So the more that you know about how it was produced, what's in there, what needed to be done instead. So I think that is sad, but it's also an opportunity, because we can differentiate ourselves because of that, and we have that's an unmet need. So we're starting with a healthy product, which is shrimp. It's very high in protein. The protein per calorie is the highest, and then you think about what is needed in order to produce it. It has the best feed conversion ratio. We can even get 1-to-1. So that means that we can get 1 kilogram of shrimp chow into 1 kilogram of shrimp, right? Which is the case for cattle is 7-to-1. So then we are also defining our identity brand, which is called Agua Blanca Seafood. As the more you learn about our shrimp, the more you will enjoy it. And if you're a nerd like me, you will start to like when they talk about the science behind it, and about microbial communities, and how these microbial communities are akin to fertile soil, and how we can harvest this fertile soil, then turn it into put it into a biodigester. From that, create biofuel and also create bile, which is an organic fertilizer. So then it is like the more our customers scratch the surface about what we do, the more they like it. So I think that's for us is the best opportunity to differentiate our product and then to build a brand around that.
That's interesting.
Just going to add to his point. So, the sustainability piece, huge. So free from the dyes, free from preservatives right now, 56% increase in sales if it has that claim. So he's on the right track here, guys. All right, you're winning him over. Okay, I think that's really important. But then we also have to think of alternative proteins, and I think this is important because people love feeding their families, but I think they love feeding their pets more and healthier. And we're going to see alternative proteins like cricket flour is going to be on a rise, okay, as an alternative protein. And then when we think of like meat proteins, we're seeing a huge increase in like cottage cheese, anchovies, things that we would never have thought would be on the rise. So just kind of have your eye for that. And then if you are a big investor, I would tell people to invest in mushroom farms and as well as sea vegetables. Okay, you can look that up later, but yeah, big increase, 37% increase in sales in that space. So yeah, sorry, I just had to add the fun.
No, please do. That's great. Yeah, and I think your insight, Daniel, is interesting about people. People want to know where their food comes from, but when they arrive there, they don't always love the answer. And so, so interesting the opportunity that we have to address throughout the agri-food chain and throughout the process. As you've described, to make the answer better, inherently by the way that you make your product. So it's super fascinating. So let's open it up to you all. Are there any questions in the audience? Ryan will come around with a microphone if anyone has. Yeah. I think Ryan will come around. He's coming. He's been texted. Okay. Yeah, holler. Here. We're here. I'll just walk it over.
I love cereal. There you go.
Thanks.
I love cereal. Like it's like a kind of a bad habit of mine just to eat high carb, high sugar cereals. And I walk down the aisle and I'm like, why can't I ever find an affordable, better for you cereal that actually tastes good? And so that's just me as one consumer, but I'm curious on what you guys think. What are consumers demanding that the innovation hasn't been developed yet?
So when we talk about the high carbohydrate, sugary foods, we didn't touch on the GLP-1 effect, the Ozempic effect, and I don't see that the prices for some of those things are actually going to go down because I think they're having a demand issue. We do a very large survey of our consumers, and I think it's like 31% said in the next year they have plans to be on a GLP-1 drug or some weight loss medication. So what we have found is that does impact how they shop the store. So I cannot give you the answer of how to find more affordable, healthy, especially in the cereal space. I just think that it takes a lot to create those products, and now we are already seeing alternative in sugars. It's a lot of agave that there's going to be in those products, and those are a little bit more expensive. The price of actual sugar, cane sugar, and wheat is down because the demand is down. So we're going to just see all these alternative ingredients that, it takes time for some of these places to produce to meet the demand of the consumers.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think a couple of other things is there's a lot of innovation in the pipeline. So I think to kind of meet the, I would say, demand of that type of profile, there's a lot of startups that are trying to get there. So I think, how do we really reduce sugar intake? There's actually several startups out there that are creating new types of sugars where there's either fiber or another component to the sugar where it's not absorbed into the body. But again, these haven't come to the market yet, so it's how these will be integrated throughout kind of our food supply chain. The second thing is higher protein. So I think coming up with new sorts of ingredients or integrating existing ingredients, new technologies to create some of these higher protein cereals or whatever those foods are, pastas, and we're starting to see the trend with something, I would say in the pasta category, you have like banza or you have lentil proteins. But I think the cereal category is kind of ripe for innovation. And, how do we integrate and kind of speed to market some of these new technologies that are in the pipeline right now? So I'd say you're probably not going to get it next year, but I'd say in the next, 5 to 10 years, I think there's going to be a lot more startups that will be partnering with some of those big CPG companies to be able to bring that to the market.
I think also protein is, there was a couple of misfires in terms of future of protein. For me, plant-based, these things that look like, I cannot believe is not whatever. I don't think it makes sense. I think that we're probably looking at going down, right, losing really market share, and also lab-grown stuff. In the end, I think this is processed food, and I think that probably, and I'm not the consumer expert, but I think that's something that is authentic and it's in its natural form, because we have been running this chemical experiment with our bodies for the last 70 years or so. So I think that coming out of that is important, and I think that technology hasn't been able to deliver on that yet.
So a lot more focus maybe on food as health, and the GLPs. The GLP-1s is an interesting transformation that is driving, as well as the changing business models in healthcare. And as as we sit in the agriculture space, Juliana and I both squarely upstream in the ag space, I think the conversations that are starting to percolate in our areas related to nutrition and foundational foods, related to the the potential for companion foods, the potential for foods that actually mimic the feelings of GLP-1s, and the opportunity to kind of marry up food as health, with what happens in the marketplace with that and the surrounding industries that emerge. So really, I think interesting opportunity and dialogue to happen. Another question?
Hi, thank you. My name is Jenya Dana. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for BioMade, which is an organization that supports bioindustrial manufacturing. And so I'm fascinated by the conversation around some of these new food products. The sweeteners, Juliana, was really interesting. We have a member, Ubli, who uses precision fermentation to create really, really concentrated sugars so that you can get the bang for your sugar with a much, much smaller quantity. Small plug. We'll be talking about more of this at 1 o'clock today. But I would have a question for you around some of the innovations that you were talking about, particularly in the genomic space and the integration of new molecules or new aspects that drive creation of new products that may find some interesting challenges in the regulatory system. How do you work with your innovators or your strategy when you're looking at those kinds of innovations where, from our experience, those pathways are not always super clear, and so there can be some huge hang-ups in terms of the estimations of when those things will come to market?
Definitely. No, regulatory is a huge topic. And I would say for a lot of different food ingredients, there's a lot of changes happening. I would say in the US, Europe, different countries of the world, we're seeing constant kind of change. If we look at the genomic pathway, I would say GMO, that's a very challenging space to kind of get approved, especially if you're introducing a new protein. But I would say for gene editing, there's a lot more, I would say, speed potentially for regulatory approval. I think Europe is working on existing regulations where new genomic techniques and GTs are actually going to likely get approved. And so gene editing technologies like CRISPR or Talem, or there's several different types out there where you're not introducing that new genome. We're kind of hopeful that there could increase speed to market in that specific category. So I would say, to answer your question, regulatory is, yes, very challenging, but I think there are new technologies, especially coming over from the biotech space, that we can learn and say, okay, how do we integrate this into the agriculture supply chain to really help that speed and pathway to market? So I think it's going to delay a lot of products being able to reach the end consumer by several years, but I think new technologies are being introduced that can hopefully speed things to market. But great question. Thanks for asking.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the founder of Revival, and it's a food brand that focuses on making almond butter without any added sugars, preservatives, palm oil, free from a lot of bad things. So I have two questions. One is, what are you seeing in CPG in the emerging brand space? Just as far as like, what are the trends? What's some top trends that you're seeing right now? Emerging brands versus, these conglomerate and the private label brands. And my other question is, there's a lot of innovation, and you're talking about all of these creative things that, are lab grown, proteins, et cetera, happening in CPG too. But what are you seeing in the trends versus like the real foods where it's simple, the simple foods made with real simple ingredients versus, more of these innovations in protein that, kind of like the impossible foods of the world?
Yeah. So we define that as the ultra-processed foods versus the natural form. So we do have ability to call that out. As far as emerging trends, emerging brands, I get this question everywhere I go. It is something we are capable of tracking. And a lot of times we're even able to get insight before those items hit the shelves. Because a lot of those images for these products come to our company first before even the retailer has them out there. So as far as the emerging brands, we have to think of it like holistically, because I gave you guys some really good insight, like the mushrooms, the sea vegetables, that's not going to go anywhere. But also think about it from a different lens of what is happening in our population. So you've got these Gen Zers that are coming in, very intuitive what they're putting in their bodies. They love everything that's clean, free from. It's going to be on the rise, and it's not going to go anywhere. All right, so that's, I think, number one. So you're in a good space, right? Just like similar to the shrimp, you're in a good space. But then I also think about this aging population, and we have a lot of women that are now talking about menopause. All right, and I think it's a maca root. It's Peruvian fruit. We're going to see that on the rise, and I think it's going to be in other ingredients. No different than collagen went from beauty into our food. Who would have ever thought? I can't win. I'm like, I should have been a man, because I'm like, now you want me to eat this stuff? I'm like, I can't get it. So I think that those are some of the emerging things we're going to continue to see. But don't take your eye off that prize when it comes to understanding that you're going to have these boomers that are going to have necessities as well as the Gen Zers, and really track what's gravitating for them and make sure that you're having that kind of flavor profile of sorts in there. Another emerging thing that I need to, real fast, I'll touch on. So we are predicting by 2027, right now our richest economies, it goes US, China, Germany, Japan. 2027, number 3 will be India. Okay? Why that makes sense, and why do you need to pay attention to this? A lot of those Indian spices and those profiles will start entering into our market because the demand here that will come to the US. So chickpeas, things like that, you'll probably see a bigger demand for. We saw this even, how many of you guys recognize that you are getting a lot more Latina kind of spices, habanero spices in all your foods? You guys noticed that in the last year? Yeah, we had to really push our retailers to go into that profile. We did a lot of surveying, and with that, it just took off. So I feel like everyone has a spicy version of their product today. So that's just something to watch, is how is our economy changing, and the I would say the profile of what people are interested in having has also been drastically changing too.
So you're talking now about intergenerational and different consumers, right? Do you think, or up to what is the impact of the influence of Gen Zers to boomers, for instance? Like maybe women that are thinking about menopause are looking also at natural ingredients because it's now in fashion, or I don't know. Do you see that? Can you measure that?
Absolutely. I think we've gotten more conscientious about what we're putting in our body, but we're also getting more educated. Before, retailers and manufacturers alike did not feel like they had a social responsibility to tell you something was free from. Now it's a mandate. It's mandated, otherwise you will not survive in this market. We know where the puck is headed. So we do all this packaging design to really help them highlight that kind of stuff. Or right now, like for example, in California, you got the dyes that are going to be removed. That's going to trickle down. So we're trying to find alternative ingredients that still give you, like, for your Fruit Loops still want to taste like Fruit Loops, but they're not going to have the red dye. I'm sorry, I love Fruit Loops. I don't know if you do. So we got to think. We are helping them identify what those ingredients can be, and whatever that is, that substitute invest in it because it's going to be rapid and across the U.S.
Well, time is really ticking away here. So if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, our panelists will be around after this session, and you'll be able to connect with them then. What I'd like to do is finish with a question to all three of you. So fast forward 5 to 10 years. We are back here, same time, same place, same panel. What are we talking about in 5 to 10 years? Are we talking about the same things, or is it going to be different? And if so, what is it?
I hope not. I don't know. I watched a couple of movies during the last, this year. One was about the moon landing, and the other one was Asteroid City. And they had a similar vibe in terms of when people were very optimistic about technology, right? About the future. And I think that we need that again, but we will only get it if technology is aligned, delivers something that is aligned with our values, right? It's not technology that is enslaving us like The Matrix and all these movies. I grew up with those movies. So I think that we have the opportunity to deliver, using technology, to deliver something that is good for consumers, it's good for the environment. So I think that if we nail that, then we can be talking about different stuff, probably flavors or trends, or not something that it's like fending off threats.
So I kind of have two answers. So I'd say the first answer is if we look at right now our existing supply chain, to make changes to meet consumer demand upstream takes a long time. So I think of the new technologies that are kind of coming forth in the upstream, kind of what we're looking at for inputs for farmers, to kind of looking at those CPGs trends, I think there's going to be a convergence of how do we increase speed and communication from looking at data and insights from CPG, and how do we implement new changes throughout the agriculture supply chain to really create new products, new business channels to kind of meet that consumer end demand. So I think we'll be talking probably less about maybe new technologies and more about more go-to-market strategies, more about how do we increase, I mean, I hate this buzzword, but AI throughout the supply chain to kind of help educate upstream either manufacturers, farmers, distributors to meet that end consumer. So I think that's one answer. The other answer is there's this new category within the health food sector called medical foods. And this is really introducing how do we look at the blurring of the lines between healthcare and food. And I think it's a complicated space because you're introducing insurance providers as well as CPG healthcare consumers. And so I think this will be kind of an interesting space that'll emerge over the next 5 to 10 years where, you know, you're really merging two different industries. So that's kind of my perspective on the future.
Yeah, from a retail lens, I will say I was very concerned and almost disheartened when I found out that Walmart was closing 51 of their health and wellness centers. Because what I will tell you is retailers follow whatever Walmart's doing. They like to take that lead. And that was heartbreaking because then also I saw the trend of a lot of retailers basically firing all their chief medical officers that they had hired, okay? That is a concern of mine. So when I think of like what we're gonna be talking about, it's definitely gonna be food as medicine, but then also with the responsibility of retailers in that space and manufacturers all alike. But then I think what we're going to probably witness a little bit of a trend next year, hopefully, is around, everyone loves the word sustainability, but no one actually knows how to define it. We have about 15 definitions. I kind of lose my mind about it, but I would like us to start seeing more discussions around sustainable packaging, because I think that ag really needs to get in that business. They already are in European countries, and I think that they could definitely have an influence here about like how do we create. I'm not a scientist, but there's something behind it all. Like I would like to see if we could get rid of styrofoam and have a replacement for that. So I think that will be an awesome space that I'd love to see us talking about next year.
Excellent. Well, I think we've heard a lot of interesting themes. I think one of my takeaways from even from this last question is the role that technology plays in helping to support and enable, but not being the kind of overt, the overt thing that we are delivering to consumers. The linkage between health and food and agriculture is undeniable. The communication across those sectors has not always been the best. And I think, based on the comments that we're hearing today, we're starting to see those lines kind of blur, and hopefully those industries will be talking together more intentionally in the future. So there's so many questions that we didn't get to. I think we could probably be here until they turn the lights off on us if we had the time. I encourage you to connect with our panelists afterwards. Tons of very interesting perspectives on what's going to happen with drugstores, on how aquaculture is being influenced and impacted by Ataraya and Ataraya's design and influence, what's happening with the big tech players and why they may be pulling back from their investment in their investments in the agriculture space. So please do talk with these folks and connect with them afterwards. And thank you all again for being here. And I'd just like to recognize Daniel Rusek, Juliana Green, and Lorelei Bergen. Please help me in thanking them again for their time today.